Help me welcome to Hemphill County, the Texas Panhandle, this region of the world, the Undersecretary of Agriculture for the United States of America, Mr. Bill Northey.
Thank you. Well, thank you. That sounds like a tall order to be able to try and deliver. But let me tell you, it's an honor to be here with you. Certainly, we've had some conversations about the challenges that you've all faced. And we were up in Oklahoma yesterday. Some of the challenges, some of them are facing right now, and none of us know when it's all over. But you know, this country looks a little different than my country in Iowa. It certainly looks different than some of the other areas I've been in, from California to Maine. But people in agriculture are the same. They're humble, they're tough, they help each other when the helping needs to happen. It's an honor to be here to certainly deliver a welcome from Secretary Perdue, an effort to try and make sure that we are as responsive as we need to be at USDA to the challenges that you're all facing. And we know that some of the programs are very helpful and some of them don't work just the way you think they ought to. And we want to hear about those situations where they don't work the way they ought to. And when we can, we want to be able to try and make sure that they work a little bit better. So let me give you a little bit of background. I come from Iowa, as was mentioned. I grew up on a farm there, and our family fed cattle. We didn't have cow-calf, but we fed about 1,000 head of cattle at a time, and traditional kind of Iowa farmer feeders, and grew up showing calves, and this feels like home. There is something special about cattle folks. All of ag probably feels the same way, and I hope they do. But there's certainly something special about the cattle business wherever it's at. Again, the special challenges that all brings. I tell you, it's a great way to grow up too, isn't it? All of us feel certainly blessed to have had the situation that we've had. I remember back one of my favorite experiences. I don't remember how old I was exactly. I think I was 16. My folks and my sister were going off on a trip, and they asked me if I was going too. They were going overseas first time, and I was kind of interested, but I had the opportunity of staying home, staying with the hired man, and taking care of 1,000 head of cattle, feeding them twice a day and making sure that everything was working. And I remember the trust that you felt, that I felt, that our family had put in us. Obviously, a hired man could do everything. He didn't need me around. But they made me feel like I was involved and responsible. There's a lot of opportunities on a farm or a ranch to be able to grow up, sometimes at a pretty young age, to be able to grow up and have that sense of responsibility that sometimes we don't value until a whole lot later, right? We consider it work at the time. Later, we realize how valuable it is. And certainly, I was very blessed with that experience as well, and I trust many of you were. So I became Secretary of Ag, and Secretary Perdue asked me to be involved here as an undersecretary. Let me just talk about this role as undersecretary. So within USDA, you have a secretary, that's Secretary Perdue. You have a deputy secretary. You have 7 undersecretaries, each responsible for a mission area. Each mission area is a little different. The one that we're responsible for is called Farm Production and Conservation. And so it's a new mix of programs. It is Farm Service Agency, so that's your farm loan programs, your commodity support programs, your CRP program, and then certainly some programs that are helpful, exterior fences. After the wildfire, there's some other programs there that are very helpful. And then NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Service. Again, many of you are very familiar with that. I've heard how there were certainly some programs extremely important in the last year to folks, but well before that and well after that as well. 2 agencies that together often are in the same location. We're in different mission areas before. Actually, they had computer systems that didn't talk to each other. Had sometimes different rules in one side of the house versus the other side of the house. And the Secretary's vision is to say, these folks need to work together. We need to in Washington make sure that we don't get it in the way of the folks in the countryside that know how to work together. We need to make sure our paperwork works, our computers work, all the kinds of things work that let the folks on the front line be able to provide the customer service that brought them to the agency. And then the third piece of this farm production and conservation is the risk management agency. So that's the crop insurance program, primarily staffed by folks as private crop insurance agents, adjusters, companies, but about 500 people in the Department of Agriculture that set up the rules around crop insurance programs, that work with the folks and make sure that those rules and some of the finances are involved, and certainly the financial support is there for that to all happen. So the Secretary talks about these as being that customer-facing part of USDA. And when he talks about customer service, and I haven't heard him talk once without talking about it, he always talks about this farm production and conservation area. He is dedicated to making sure that we're measuring that, figuring out how we can do a better job, how we inside that agency make sure that we're serving the folks in the office as well so that they can do a better job, and that we're out listening to the folks that can tell us how programs need to work better for them as well. Secretary, I believe, sometime this week will hit his 1-year anniversary as Secretary of Agriculture. Originally from Georgia, a veterinarian, and certainly he was a governor for 8 years, very hard driving about making sure that government needs to work for people. He has been to nearly 40 states in the year that he's been in office, and he certainly pushes us to make sure that we're getting out to listen to the folks about what's going on, and that we are to take home what we hear about those things that need to work. So that's why we're out and around, to get a chance to be able to share a little bit about what we're doing, but an awful lot of what we've been trying to do is listen. Listen to the special challenges that there are, that you all have in the midst of drought, in the midst of the wildfires, and whatever kinds of other challenges that we have out there, and that we make sure that our programs are working in a way that we can defend the good expense of taxpayer dollars, but in a way that works for the people that need to participate in those programs. It's a great pleasure to be here. I appreciate the invitation and the great hospitality that we've had here. Through some folks that were in a lot of stress, certainly yesterday as well as today. Your willingness to talk about the things that need to happen are very important. Let me mention one of those. So we announced yesterday that the livestock forage program in Oklahoma that had a planting date. You did not participate in the livestock forage program if you planted after October 1st. Planted wheat for grazing after October 1st. We announced that you can participate in the program. You participate in the program. You have a prorated rate after that, but that does not knock you completely out of the program. And we're in the process of working on the same thing for Texas. Certainly, I think there's probably some folks in here that, for good reasons, maybe weather reasons, other kinds of things happen, where you planted the first week of October, you turn around right now and you find out that you weren't eligible for a program that could be awful important when you don't have wheat to graze. And you should be able to graze that program. So we're in the process of working that out. And I hope, certainly by the end of the week, that we're able to make that announcement here for Texas as well. Another program that was important to folks last year was the Livestock Indemnity Program. That's a program that pays for when livestock are killed in a weather event or a disaster. Last year, for many of you, that helped in some of the losses. Again, it does not ever make anybody whole. Everybody would rather have, a happy pair than they would to be able to be partially paid for that cow and that calf. But it does help take some of the edge, especially when there's been a significant loss. So that program worked last year. Congress actually changed that program earlier this year to be able to pay for those losses of animals that die or that were reduced in value because, for example, they got burned. And so you sold them. They lived so that you could not qualify for livestock indemnity program, but you sold them at a much lower value. Now you can go into the FSA office, talk to them about what you need for verification on that, but that is available as well for animals that are sold at reduced value. We actually just announced as well, I believe it went out today, a program in part instigated by the challenges up with the snowstorm that just went through up in the Dakotas about it, where we're hearing maybe 25,000 calves were lost. We hear different numbers, so it's hard to tell at the beginning exactly what happened. But we also know that the situation here, last year, the situation in Oklahoma right now, you have some animals that end up with health problems post fire as well. And even if you're keeping them, they can end up with health problems, die 60 days later, 90 days later. According to the rules, if they didn't die right at the event or very nearly after the event, they were not eligible for the livestock indemnity program. They are now eligible if a veterinarian will validate that loss to that animal was due to that event. So our desire is not to pay for normal losses, or certainly folks that have an ability to keep an animal alive and the animal doesn't need to die. But if that event, in this case maybe certainly you have some lung damage that can happen from fires, you have lots of other things that can happen out there that will eventually take an animal. That was the triggering event that made that happen. Even through the best care, you can have a situation where you lose an animal and you lose them 90 days later, directly related to that event. That should be covered as well. So a few adjustments that are hopefully going to catch a few circumstances out there. It may or may not be able to always be able to track exactly what you need or get the right amount of paperwork, but go into your county FSA, NRCS office, certainly your crop insurance agent as well. Have those conversations. Tell them about your situation. One of the conversations we had earlier today, we had some folks that knew they'd gotten some help, didn't know exactly which program it was. You don't have to remember the acronym. I don't always remember the acronym. So it's a challenge to be able to do that. Walk in, talk about your situation. Talk about what you got going on. Tell them what your need is. You can have a conversation. They may well have something, they may not. But that's the way to be able to find out what program may be the right program for you. Let me, right in the midst of that, ask all the folks from FSA, NRCS, and RMA to please stand and let us thank you for your work. Who's here? We have folks over here. Jamie Cassie, you stand. As was mentioned, I think I get to work with the best people in federal government. First of all, we got a lot of folks with an ag connection at USDA, and I think our piece of USDA especially does. We have about 2,200 offices of each of these agencies across the country. We have 22,000 employees in this mission area. I went from a State Department of Ag with 330 people now to 22,000 folks across the country. A lot more programs than I could ever. We got more programs than I used to have people that I need to know about and try and understand. But we have great people. People that care about you, people that want things to be able to work, and certainly an exciting and challenging time in trying to make sure that these programs work right. Let me actually look at my notes and make sure. Let me mention one thing that certainly comes up from time to time, and that is the trade issue. And what are we going to do with all the stuff we create out here? We do such a great job in production. We export an awful lot of our meat, our beef, and our pork. We export a lot of cotton and soybeans and corn. And we do such a great job that when other people when we challenge trade against those folks that are not keeping the promises that they made in the trade deals, they come right back and hit our agriculture, don't they? We're kind of on the front of that spear when they decide they're going to retaliate and try and stop some trade action against them. So agriculture is vulnerable. We're right in the midst of that now. I wish I could tell you exactly where that's going to go. I don't know. I don't know how the other countries are going to react to this. I do know that in many cases the challenges that we're making are challenges because folks are not following through on the promises that they made. There needs to be a challenge. Now, there also needs to be some way of supporting the folks that have the potential of being impacted. In a large case, that's agriculture. So I think you've heard the Secretary, you've heard the President say, we need to find ways to holding agriculture harmless in this. The best way, right, is not lose trade at all. We'll see whether that happens or not. We're sure hopeful that that happens. If there is reaction against trade, then there'll be lots of things that have to be looked at in how we soften that blow. In the meantime, in the long term, we need trade. We need to be able to export the products that we produce so well that the rest of the world wants. And we need to do it without the uncertainty of trade rules constantly changing. How that all plays out, I don't know, but I know the Secretary is very engaged in it. Got a good friend across the hall from our office who's Ted McKinney. He's the Undersecretary for Trade in USDA, and so he's got 200 offices around the country and sits in on the conversations about what the trade discussions are all about. We talk often about where that's all going, where we think it's going, what kinds of things we'll need to do if there's reaction against our ag products overseas as well. So I wish I could tell you exactly where that's all going to go. I wish I also could tell you exactly where the Farm Bill is all going to go. We're expecting and we're hoping that we'll have a Farm Bill this coming year. You heard maybe that the House Ag Committee passed a Farm Bill earlier, I think it was last week, with a design hopefully to get it in front of the full House maybe sometime in May, maybe mid to late May, that the Senate Ag Committee is talking about a Farm Bill maybe in May as well. It'll probably look very different than the House bill. And then they would go to a conference committee where they've got to iron out those differences. There's a lot of things that need to happen between now and when the current Farm Bill runs out, and that's September 30. There's some folks that are trying to address odds. I'm not going to talk about what the odds are of getting a Farm Bill done between now and September 30th, but I think folks have done the count. It's the last 4 or 5 or 6 Farm Bills have all had an extension before they've actually gotten passed. I'm hopeful that we could break that string and we could actually get a Farm Bill done this year, because we need the certainty that a Farm Bill provides for the future. It's going to look a lot like the things that we appreciate now. A crop insurance program, a conservation programs we appreciate. There's certainly discussion around a CRP program, what kind of adjustments. Something that's very popular in this area as well is CSP program. Certainly the Oklahoma folks, it's been very popular with. That looks like it's, at least the House is discussing some change of being able to put it into the EQIP program. So we'll see how that all comes together. There's a lot of moving pieces. Mind you, we're certainly paying close attention and trying to make sure that whatever those changes are, we get that information out to you. You know how to be able to make sure that the Farm Bill works for you as well. So let me just close in a conversation a little bit about the general idea of risk management, from crop insurance to managing some of the other pieces we talked about in a disaster. That is one of the most important jobs, I believe, USDA and some of our other partners out there are involved in. I should also mention, USDA, please look at us as another voice for agriculture within the balance of our federal government. So one of the things we spent a lot of time doing is talking to other parts of U.S. government. I was with folks from EPA, Interior this week, or last week in a conversation about the kinds of things we need to be doing together on the water quality issue and how we've got so much good work going on in agriculture that needs to be recognized within their programs. You hear other things, whether it's electronic logging devices, other things that are important that you need that voice in agriculture to carry into other parts of government. Certainly get involved in your farm organizations and get help. They're the most important voice, but we as well can be a help in trying to engage the folks in other parts of the federal government to make sure that some folks that are a lot more distant to agriculture need to understand what the impact of some of their programs are. Lastly, just let me say again, thank you for the great hospitality that you have provided us. Let me introduce Jamie Clover Adams. Jamie, would you stand up? Jamie is our Chief of Staff at Farm Production and Conservation. She's got all kinds of seniority on me. She got there 3 days before I did, which was about 6 weeks ago. So we're still the new kids learning as fast as we can. She was Director of Ag in Michigan, and actually a few years before that was Secretary of Ag in Kansas as well. So she's got a state on me as well. I've just been a Secretary of Agriculture in one state, but Jamie is a great partner. Certainly reach out to either of us or all the team in being able to let us know what you all need to have done. But thank you for the hospitality you showed Jamie and I. Certainly we look forward to getting back. You have a beautiful country here. Agriculture looks different everywhere. I love corn and soybean fields too. And I love the trees of Maine and the vegetable fields of the Central Valley, and we have an amazing agriculture to be a part of, and we get to be outside and enjoy it with all the challenges and risks that involves. We often get to do it with our families, which is another blessing that some in other parts of the occupations and the work world out there don't get to be as involved with. And I say we get to do it alongside friends and neighbors that sometimes are competition, but often when we really need them, they're there to be able to help us when we're going through our challenges, whether it's a storm or a financial challenge or other kinds of things. Let us certainly make sure that we as USDA are another group that can pull alongside and try and help when you're going through some of those challenges. So again, thank you for the opportunity to be here. I appreciate the invitation to be here. I too think there were some interesting circumstances that led to it, and we'll, whether others will call those coincidences or not, I'm very glad and certainly blessed to be with y'all. Appreciate it. Thank you.